Hello, friends of the World's Whale Project 7th edition, the first edition for 2017. The super rich are in charge. They're trying to make autocracy. It's having a lot of opposition for different reasons that have been published, and I guess the world's wide opinion have already found out about protests in the beginning for the women's rights groups and all around the world, as you witnessed. And then the ban on the people of 7 different countries that mostly are being bombarded now by the United States government.
In most countries, the citizens know who they're at war with. But here in the United States, it's sometimes a little difficult to keep track of who we're bombing at any given moment.
Do you know how many countries the U.S. is currently bombing?
I have no idea.
No.
A few?
40 in between 50.
I think 1 or 2.
I don't know. My favorite color is purple.
In fact, we're currently bombing 7 different countries. Now, let's start with the easy one. If you've been watching the presidential debates, you know that ISIS is a major concern to our candidates.
ISIS.
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 You brag that you have sexually assaulted women. ISIS.
ISIS is located in Iraq and Syria, so we're dropping bombs on both those countries. Syria is a real humanitarian catastrophe where literally half of the country's 22 million people have been either killed or displaced. The Syrian war is a complicated clusterfuck with at least 4 different factions fighting each other. Our goals there are to knock out ISIS, but also to knock out the Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad, but they're fighting each other, so sometimes it's a little difficult to know who's bombing whom. The fact that we're bombing Iraq should come as no surprise. As The Onion points out, we've been bombing them off and on for about 25 years now. The other country that shouldn't come as too much of a surprise is Afghanistan. We invaded them way back in 2001 in response to the 9/11 attacks. We've been fighting there for 15 years now, and there's no end in sight. It is officially the longest war in American history. And as part of our war in Afghanistan, we're also bombing Pakistan. That's because sometimes the Taliban and Al-Qaeda hide out in the northern part of that country along the Afghan border. Now is where things start to get a little bit more complicated. We're also bombing a country called Yemen. Now, the war in Yemen is incredibly complex. But basically, we're conducting our own drone strikes there to target Al-Qaeda camps, but we're also supporting Saudi Arabia's larger attack on a group of rebels known as the Houthis. To be clear, the situation in Yemen is also a massive humanitarian disaster. According to the UN, 80% of the Yemeni population is in desperate need of humanitarian aid to meet even its most basic needs. There is evidence that the Saudis are deliberately targeting civilians. According to The Guardian, more than 1/3 of all Saudi-led air raids on Yemen have hit civilian sites, such as school buildings, hospitals, markets, mosques, and economic infrastructure. Just the other day, there was a U.S.-backed Saudi-led airstrike on a funeral that killed 140 people and wounded another 525. According to the Associated Press, in the aftermath of the strike, hundreds of body parts were found strewn in and outside the hall. Rescuers collected them in sacks. The attack turned the funeral into a lake of blood. Another country we're bombing is Libya. Now, you may remember we bombed them way back in 2011 to get rid of their dictator, Muammar Gaddafi. But after we got rid of Gaddafi, the country descended into chaos and ISIS was able to move in. So now we're bombing them because we don't like the replacement for the guy that we didn't like. And finally, the 7th country we're currently bombing is Somalia. Back in March, an American drone killed 150 people there. Now, immediately, the Obama administration put out a statement that claimed that every one of those 150 people was a dangerous terrorist from Al-Shabaab, a group that has carried out several attacks within Somalia. No one has independently verified that all 150 people killed were in fact terrorists. The only evidence we do have is from that one statement, from the government that killed them. And that brings up another important point. Who exactly does the U.S. government consider an enemy combatant in the endless global war on terror? The New York Times reports that the Obama administration considers all military-age males in a strike zone as combatants, unless there is explicit intelligence posthumously proving them innocent. Well, that's convenient. Any dude standing near a place where we decide to bomb is an enemy of the United States. If you really think about it, they're not wrong. So just to recap, since we launched the war on terror after September 11, 2001, we've spent $4 trillion, and 1.3 million people have been killed in our combat zones all around the world. So Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Yemen, Libya, and Somalia are the 7 countries we are currently dropping bombs at. Oh, And just as a reminder, the number of wars currently authorized by our Congress, 0.
And then we have found that President Trump has been opposed. Some people are speaking about impeaching him from now on in order for him not to exercise the presidency of the most powerful country in the world. So now the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are still trying to keep the pace they had with the last 50 years of our government in the United States. We're going to see what's going to happen when the rich people is in charge. As long as International Monetary Fund and the World Bank dictates all policies around the world when it comes to trade and markets, the super rich, in other words, the corporate citizens, which have way more rights than the natural citizens, we're going to be arguing that they have and they know what to do, especially when it comes to the realities that are facing economically, financially, the austerity programs all around the world. Then what is going to happen with the new markets, what's going to happen with the autocracy that Mr. Trump and capitalism is viewing now. So the owners of corporations are in charge. States, republics, democracies are controlled by the corporations. These countries, the United States, Latin America, wherever they have the influence, they're going to make them dependent or make dependent of the other countries of the world dependent of these economies of their own, of the corporations. As I said, supported by the IMF and the WB. This is creating devastated economies all around the world. If you take a look to Latin America, Asia, and others, Africa, which are unknowingly involved in agreements, like quote unquote, where some local entrepreneurs of those countries in Latin America, Africa, Asia, some elite enterprises will benefit, while the millions of common Joes, which integrate the social fabric, are left behind. Let's not forget that the social fabric stopped existing since the corporate intelligence incorporates citizens and the new entrepreneurs for corporate minds that have been developing such ideals in the universities like Columbia and Harvard, because universities have been influenced by such policies and they have been educated to keep on going and working with the corporate ideals, which are to benefit and maximize the benefits with the privatization ideas. In other words, they're going to keep destroying the social fabric. This is exactly why Donald Trump was elected for president of the United States, because it is believed that he's going to change all those factors. Now that, as has been shown by the worldwide public opinion, citizens, the discomfort around the world, whether it is in Europe, especially, of course, the United States now, but it has been like this in Latin America, Africa. We don't want to carry on these kind of policies that have been destroying the economies all around the world. I say it again. Now that President Trump has said that America first, he wants to destroy NAFTA. That's something that has been in the agenda of his, but it's not have come to be a reality yet, as he did with TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a good deal actually, because most of the economies of the world that are honest economists and politicians have said that it was not a good deal for America or any country that was involved in this, except for the corporations and the corporate citizens that control the economy in the world. So it was a good thing what happened with the TPP, especially when they take control of governments. So we give President Trump that good point. But the problem is that if he destroys NAFTA, it's the Mexican people who are going to suffer the consequences. The people are going to suffer the most. Talking about free trade. So, what is free trade in reality? So, Latin America, the Middle East, their own people, the European and the American people, are involved in these new trade agreements where privatization and maximization of profits are the same goals as less administration. Well, nothing is going to change. How can we call these methods and practices a civilization? A world so unique, so beautiful, yet inhabited by the leadership of abuse and war, poverty, ignorance, and uncertainty. So polluted. My friends, take a look to China, how troubled it is. India is very troubled because of the contamination and the ecosystems that are failing. So polluted, their rivers have reached incredible amounts of contamination and pollution that are just undescribable. It will take 1,000 years, friends, to rehabilitate the ecosystems, not only in China and India, but all around the world. What about its peoples? What about its policies, healthcare, government, national and international trade practices? If any of these practices are to be found to justify the effort after a corporate and autocratic form of interest, we can take a look to India. People are revolting all around India because the Prime Minister or the new President of India has not developed, as promised, the economy that he pretended to develop for the Hindu people. There are social interest enterprises that can work very well. Vandana Shiva have proven that more than once, and many others. Who said that social interest enterprises are not to be profitable? Take a look to Singapore, for example. Yes, there's private industry, but there's also community industries. Take a look to some social industries in Bangladesh, where they have developed the opportunity to create their own economies, home economies. Take a look to some places in England, where, like Bristol, they have developed their own economy. They have their own currency. They still use the pound, of course, but the community lived on their own currency, which has David Bowie in the Beatles and many other artists, recognized by the British people, and is working just fine. There are many choices that we can make work, and they can make social profitable companies that can be created by the government. Privatization and globalization. It has been proven for the last 30 years that it's not working, And if you ask any economist, like Noam Chomsky, which he's a linguist, but he's a recognized intellectual, recognized all around the world, you will see that him and as Peter Schiff and Ron Paul are making omens regarding the United States economy. Something to be taken seriously. One of them said about the economy in the United States and the dollar itself as the currency, international currency for trade. These are 23, he said that 23 countries are bypassing the United States dollar. The East-West cycle, the maximum expended demographic, the wealth distribution cycle, the household debt to income and ratio cycle, the stock markets, the world's monetary systems are all pointing down to a massive deflation. In Japan, for example, they're trying to beat deflation by expanding the currency supply, and it has not worked for 20 years now. It hasn't worked yet. Apparently, to many economists, it's not going to work. But now the United States is trying to do exactly the same thing. I don't know if you remember that Bernanke was just last year went to Japan in order to find out if he can helicopter money, because there was no way to say that they can just drop the money to the people in order to activate the economy in the United States. It's not certain for now what's going to happen with the dropping of the economy like that. So, what is Donald Trump going to do about that situation? We'll see pretty soon. Economies are falling apart, especially those ones that relies on the American dollar. It's falling apart at an increasing rate. There has been many people that have said what is going to happen. Ron Paul, why? Because he was 22 years in Congress. And he ran for president 3 times, and he was never elected, but he still was a senator for the Republican Party. Are we going to listen to these people that have the experience to tell the world, especially the United States, because they are the ones with the allies, the European Union, etc., who control the economy around the world? Are they going to take the advice of social interests instead of only particular and private interests? The so-called globalization that has proven wrong, I say it again, to be wrong. The trade standards, my friends, are going to be changed pretty soon. The American dollar is in trouble. The United States dollar, as the standard of the world currency for markets, is not working. They're talking about the death of the dollar as the standard for markets and currency. Michael Maloney said that on the last year's in Canada, in Vancouver, Canada, on a meeting where he was talking about the falling of the economy. Just one of the economists. So this autocratic form of capitalism that Mr. Trump is trying to develop is being tested. National and international trade practices are to be improved. Let's see what's going to happen. But what's going to happen if the American economy is falling apart? We're going to see in the next year. So how is that the United States are going to keep the dollar as the standard currency for the markets? Well, they only know one way to do it, and that is war. But wars are good, according to the media. They promote the free world values that other people want and so desperately need. Is that right? Is this what Libya, Egypt, Yemen, Iran, Iraq, Mali, Afghanistan, and many others need? The replacement of their millenary culture in many cases for their free world values? I don't think so. They don't think so. And it has been proven for the last 20 years that it's never going to work. That is not true. No doubt their systems in those countries have proven obsolete against human rights, inadequate to a civilized update. But the problem is that democracy has not been the solution to a human problematic either, because covers other forms of corruption, abuse, intolerance to criticism, and many other factors which will be discussed throughout this work. The World's Wealth Project, friends. But after what is happening in Libya, South Sudan, Syria, where religious wars look for political ends, seems to never get old. And to the contrary, are the favorite instrument for the weapon sellers and professional instigators to keep creating the destabilization of the countries where oil and gas are the resources that the powers that be, the corporations, really want. The people of the Middle East are saying for the last 10 years, 15 years since Afghanistan, on an outcry that this has to stop. It is well spread in the media. They all want democracy, but democracy itself is to be updated. We'll get to the point of this. We cannot say that it is to be updated. It's just that it failed. But let's see what Reality Check has to say about Syria. So, what's next after recent facts that we have seen, Texas Senator Ted Cruz said, is he right? What do the numbers show? Yes. Yeah. So I hope that you guys pay attention to this. Because this can't be happening anymore. We have seen a few changes happening all around the globe. So, yes, if we're going to keep promoting wars as the way out for those countries and every country in the world, collapse is imminent. I mean, these nonsense realities are well spread in the media. They all want democracy, but democracy is dead. Politicians have killed democracy. They literally kill her. They literally kill her. It is for us, the people, we, the people. We have to resuscitate, to resurrect democracy because it's dead. The politicians literally kill her. Take a look around the world. You name me a country where democracy really works, with the exception, of course, of Iceland, with the exception, of course, of Finland, Holland, northern countries in Europe. Because the rest of Europe is in trouble. Tell me any country in the world where democracy works, really works, not even in the United States. The gap between rich and poor in the United States is incomparable with the last 2 centuries. It never has been so big. There's never been a gulf as big as it is today. Take a look to Europe. Austerity measures. Take a look to Spain. So yes, you politicians, you have killed democracy. So we the people are gonna resurrect it. Gonna take it back from us, from you guys. Because democracy is for us, for the country, for the world. There was many other parties that were working very well, like it was the Christian Party in Germany with Angela Merkel, which was performing very well until she decided to take 1 million immigrants from the countries that were at war, like Syria, Egypt, Yemen, etc. And that totally ruined her party. I don't think she's going to win the elections next time. And France and England are not very happy with these policies of immigration either. With good reason. The Christian Socialist Party in Germany was one of the great options that Europe had before. Why do I say that? Because Syrians belong to Syria, Iraqis belong to Iraq, Afghans belong to Afghanistan. But the problem is that the special interest and the national security of the powers that be, especially the powers that take control of economy, as mentioned before, well, they just search where the oil is and then destroy everything around it. Those are the facts. I'm not lying here. You know it, I know it. Everybody does. There's still resistance to adapt to new technologies and new science. And science has advanced right now way further than oil and gas industry. And they know it. The problem is that the people that has the money, the power, which is the banks and the oil companies, by the politicians, by lobbying, take control of the politicians. So the politicians do as they say. In other words, the politicians have become the prostitutes of this evil era. And I say because they sell their souls and their peoples and their economies to the conveniences of just a few.
More speculation has been raised on the reasons for NATO's intervention in Libya. And as RT's Laura Emmett reports, the organisation may have been trying to prevent Gaddafi from burying the American buck.
According to some, it's about protecting civilians.
We must not tolerate this regime using military force against its own people.
Others say it's about oil.
The only reason they're interested with Libya is about the oil. You'd think we'd be in Iraq if the major export there was broccoli.
But some are convinced intervention in Libya is all about currency, specifically Gaddafi's plan to introduce the gold dinar, a single African currency made from gold, a true sharing of the wealth.
It's one of these things that you have to plan almost in secret, because as soon as you say you're going to change over from the dollar to something else, you're going to be targeted. There were two conferences on this. One in 96 and another one in the year 2000, called the World Mataba Conference, organised by Gaddafi. And everybody was interested. I think most countries in Africa were keen.
Gaddafi didn't give up. In the months leading up to the military intervention, he called on African and Muslim nations to join together to create this new currency that would rival the dollar and euro. They would sell oil and other resources around the world only for gold dinars. It's an idea that would shift the economic balance of the world. Countries' wealth would depend on how much gold they have, not how many dollars they trade. And Libya has 144 tons of gold. The UK has double that, but 10 times the population.
If Gaddafi had an intent to try to reprice his oil or whatever else the country was selling in the global markets and accept something else as a currency, or maybe launch a gold dinar currency, any move such as that would certainly not be welcomed by the power elite today who are responsible for controlling the world's central banks. So yes, that would certainly be something that would cause his immediate dismissal and the need for other reasons to be brought forth for removing him from power.
It's happened before. In 2000, Saddam Hussein announced Iraqi oil would be traded in euros, not dollars. Sanctions and an invasion followed. Some say because the Americans were desperate to prevent OPEC from transferring oil trading in all its member countries to the euro. The UK's gold is kept here in a secure vault somewhere in the depths of the Bank of England. As in most developed countries, there's not enough to go around. But that's not the case in places like Libya and many of the Gulf states. A gold dinar would have given oil-rich African and Middle Eastern countries the power to turn around to their energy-hungry customers and say, sorry, the price has gone up and we want gold. Some say the US and its NATO allies literally couldn't afford to let that happen. Laura Emmett, RT, London.
This has been going on since Plato's days. Plato said there only can be no substitute for this democracy, which is, if you're going to make money, nobody can make more than 6 times what the minimum wage is. JP Morgan in the beginning of the 20th century said it maximum 20 times what a person makes normally as a minimum wage. But nowadays, and after 2008, Americans and Europeans are making 500 to 1,000 times more, and sometimes way more than 1,000 times what a person makes as a minimum salary. That is scandalous. People making millions of dollars a year. There's been news of guys that make $100 million a year. Who's gonna? I don't believe that there's a CEO that deserves such kind of money unless the corporation that he worked for made billions of dollars, of course. Like it was the case in 2008 with the crisis of the bubble of the house markets and the derivatives and all that stuff that is well known by the public opinion, I hope. The extreme right now is taking over in many countries in Europe, which are not satisfied or happy with the policies of austerity and the immigration of the many people that deserve to live in their countries, but the interests of the corporations cause this displacement. Yeah. Too bad for Angela Merkel. I like that woman, and people used to love her. They still do. It was the humanitarian thing to do. It was the Christian thing to do, to take those, the assist all these refugees that were dying in the ocean, the Mediterranean Sea, trying to make a better living. Yes. It's a sad story, the world in which we live in. The euro is not working either for the European zone, which is the principal cause for the countries like Italy, France, Germany, which is the one who issues the euro, England, that are leaving the European Union market and zone, and the crisis of the Union is going through the last few years. The recapitalization of the banking system in Europe. $360 billion. Yes. The International Monetary Fund, in the head of I forgot her name right now, but she said, no, it's you, the people, is going to have to recapitalize the banks because we don't have the money, guys. I'm sorry. Yeah, you're cute, but you're going to have to recapitalize the banks because, yeah, it's a 360 billion deficit because, yeah, we made bad loans and, yes, and this and that. Prime Minister Renzi, in the last referendum, yeah, he said that he was anti-establishment. He said that he wanted the people to conquer better living and leave the austerity programs in which they are involved unwillingly, thanks to the corruption and thanks for the lack of institutionality. People have lost confidence in the institutions because they don't work anymore. They just work for the profit makers and corporations and the globalization plans, which is to exclude the people. It doesn't matter where they come from or where they are. It can be Europe, it can be United States. Who cares? As long as we make billions of dollars in profit and CEOs make millions of dollars a year, it's all right. And the social fabric, left behind. Just like that. So the world it's not that it's awakened, it's already that have realized that this is it. This is the top of what the world can get. Trump is having a lot of difficulties to govern and to govern in this administration because he's not being taken seriously. Lots of in the media, the satires that have been made of him are showing nothing but disrespect for him. Other presidents will like to deal with him in ways that they don't know because he's like a little kid that never matured. And he's speaking about war. It's going to get worse, folks. That's what he says. Now that Iran has been keeping the peace in the Middle East as best as it can. Iran, Turkey, and Russia, thanks to them, there's a truce. There's a ceasefire in Syria. Very fragile, actually. But Donald Trump says that, yeah, sure, we're not going to be as cool to Iran as President Obama was. And prepare to go to war, as the satire said on the Saturday night shows. So war is the only solution for the American dollar to keep on controlling the currency on the trade markets. War, it's like the United States think that they're not going to be attacked never, ever, ever, because they are the mighty power in the world. Well, looks what happened with North Korea. It's just sent a few missiles to the Japan Sea, in total contradiction to the agreements about missile tactics and ballistic missiles and nuclear power heads and stuff like that. He totally disrespects the agreements, and the NATO is looking forward to advance on this person because he's not showing any will to change his practices. Donald Trump said that Japan and other countries should start developing nuclear weapons because they are allies of the United States. Something that has been very criticized by the military and for many others statistics that said it's very dangerous for Donald Trump to invite other countries to develop nuclear weapons, a nuclear arsenal. Because if you have more than 20 countries with the finger on nuclear weapons, you can guess what can happen in the world. Especially when they look for religious wars or a religious cause in order to create or devastate what is left of the world.
Carbon dioxide is not a pollutant.
The more you're told that you have to believe something, the more you should question it.
Environmental protection, what they do is a disgrace. Every week they come out with new regulations. They make it impossible.
Who's going to protect the environment?
They will be fine with the environment.
I hope whoever is elected president in 2017 will undo the EPA power plant regs.
And I say what is left, because now that Mr. Trump has chosen somebody that believes that the scientists are wrong, that nothing is happening around the world, that the sea level is not rising, that everything is cool, it's all a lie, it's false information, it's fake news. Yeah, that's what they say about the climate change. And if you keep thinking about what's going on with the climate change, we can see that the summits for the climate change in Paris, in Tokyo, Japan, in all those places, it's always talks, but the footprint of carbon dioxide keeps on growing. The destructive policies keeps on going. Instead of beginning to use Nikola Tesla's developments more than 100 years ago. In the 1930s, the 1940s, the cure for the diseases like cancer, Alzheimer, with a Colombian scientist, Mr. Ginás. It's a crazy world. And if you're going to put nuclear arsenals in the hands of other countries that are allies of the Americans, you don't know if that's going to last forever. Once people or countries that once were American allies have become now their enemies. Take a look to Afghanistan when Russia was there in the 80s with Charlie Good Times Wilson. A totally unknown congressman from Texas that started with a budget of $5 million and ended up with $1 billion in budget, something that never happened before. And thanks to him, Russia was displaced from Afghanistan. But now it's the United States who doesn't want to go from Afghanistan. And as was mentioned from many journalists in 2014, the war against the drugs in Afghanistan has failed. And the corruption in Afghanistan is incredible. The warlords keep on producing the poppy. Drugs keep on flying all around the world. And after 15 years, there's nothing to say, but the war on drugs is lost. But Trump insists all the Mexicans and Latinos and all those guys from all those 7 countries that we are bombarding are not welcome here because they're drug addicts, they're violent, they're crazy, they're terrorists. Who is the real terrorist? They think that the world has not noticed who is the real terrorist or who the real terrorists are. Do I have to really say it here, guys? Another thing that I would like to tell you guys is that There's another issue that is coming on onto us, and that is the presence of the unidentified flying objects. Yes, this sounds ridiculous. It might sound ridiculous to you, but it's not a joke. Ain't no joke. The sightings of UFOs has been like a revelation in the last 10 years. For the people have their own video cameras and have their own smartphones. Do you really think that President Trump is the right person to tell us that there's new civilizations after what President Obama said last year on Jimmy Kimmel's show? Or Mrs. Hillary Clinton? When she said, yeah, if they don't represent a threat to us, why don't tell the people? Like, we don't know. Like, we just don't know anything about it. Like, yeah, they have to tell us, otherwise we won't believe. Really? Do you really think people are that dumb? Or do you think, or is people who think that you politicians are that dumb that you still control only by force? Because that's the only way that you can control us, we, the people that seek for democratic, to resuscitate, to resurrect democracy. How long are you going to hide this from us? It doesn't matter. We already know. You're not doing us any favors here if you said that. This year in 2017, which is something that the World's Whale Project has been waiting for. Because we already know. There's plenty of documents, plenty of films, plenty of video that tell us that you guys are nothing but liars. And you have been in charge of the world, you politicians, for more than 2,000 years. Nobody believes in you. Nobody believes in intellectuals anymore, because only few intellectuals, they say that they have the reason for this and they have the reason for that, and they justify their means when it comes to the exploration of oil and gas. Yes, of course you need people that have been, you're not going to use people with no knowledge when it comes to engineering, when it comes to geology, when it comes to, of course, those sciences are necessary, and you need intellectuals and professionals in those areas in order to develop the so-called progress that only kills people, devastates people, kill nature. Awesome. That's great what you have done, politicians around the world, in the name of progress, in the name of democracy. But you literally killed her. You did. You are to blame. So, now that the UFOs defy all the laws of physics, how are you going to explain to us, with NOVA and all those programs in PBS and all those guys, who's going to talk about that? We're going to have to find ourselves. There's plenty of people interested in that. There's a program called Disclosure. I think you guys have already heard of it, Disclosure, with Dr. Stephen Greer, who the club press conference 10 years ago has begun the movement for us to know what's going on in the universe and to create new sources of power, zero-point gravity, etc. That's it. I think this is enough. We cannot tolerate this kind of governments anymore. We, the people, ask for evolution. And if we have to start with a revolution in order to gain evolution, well, that's what we have to do. We invite intellectuals, of course. When I say the intellectuals are not being trusted around the world, it's because the intellectuals are the ones who have the economy as it is in Europe, in the European zone. The intellectuals are the ones that are run for policy and as politicians. And those guys that have been well trained in different universities, once they gain the power to become politicians, they take part on the revolving door that is the private and corporate intelligence plus the political intelligence, which is never been so dumb like in our last century. I have to tell you guys, this will be called the darkest of all eras known to man. Because with all the technology, all the science that we have developed, we still live like primates. We kill each other. At least animals don't kill each other unless it's necessary. But in this world, you politicians kill everybody else in the name of progress because of your special interests. You're not evolving, you're devolving. And whoever is in charge of you guys, because that's what Obama said that when he was interviewed at Jimmy Kimmel's show, and said, okay, what is it with the ETs? And he said, they exercise a powerful control over us. He said it plainly like that, between smiles and laughs. Yeah, we know, but yes, they exercise tremendous control over us. Yeah. So, like in the book of, like in the Bible, in Ephesians 6, the struggle is not against flesh and blood. It's against principalities, powers in the sky. What's going to happen if these aliens were, to which America and Europe have relations with, have enemies too, and they want to take God away from our realities? Because of course religion has proven obsolete now. Yes, in many ways, no doubt. We have to accept it, that in the name of religion you kill another because he doesn't believe in your God. That's archaic. That's for sure archaic. What's happening in Africa? Christians kill Muslims and Muslims kill Christians. So we are not going anywhere here with religions. But that doesn't mean that God not exists. Now, we have to define what God is. And for that matter, you're going to have to see the next World's Wealth Project, the next edition of the World's Wealth Project, which I invite you to do so. We're going to talk about this in the next edition of the World's Wealth Project. As you know, the World's Wealth Project is transmitted in 2 different languages, English and Spanish. I hope that the rest of the world takes on me and write me and contact me so that we can develop these ideals, which are not just ideals, which are truths that we can produce by changing economies, by discarding cutting off the economies as we understand it nowadays. If we want to evolve, and we want to evolve, it's just you, the politicians, who doesn't want us to evolve. We have to get rid of you. Period. We need leadership, not politicians. We need intellectuals, we need scientists, we need economists, but good ones. Take a look to Noam Chomsky, for example. I said again, he's a linguist. But he knows about economy, and many economists that are sound and well-oriented, not for profit, but for revolution. That's what we need. And you know what? Even if you don't do it, politicians, and you go to war against us, you're going to lose in the end. Because what religions are trying to tell us all throughout history is that they're superior beings than us that are going to take charge sooner or later, whether you like it or not. There's good and bad up there too. So, yes, I hope you accompany us in the next encounter with the World's Wealth Project, W Infinite. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.